The sound of her heels announced Vanessa's arrival before I ever saw her face. Click-clack, click-clack, sharp and deliberate against the marble floor of Crescent National Bank. A sound that demanded attention. My own shoes made no noise at all. I was standing in line on a Tuesday morning, waiting for the next available teller. The bank was moderately busy. Cool air, the faint smell of corporate freshness, the low hum of 100 small transactions. I was clutching my old leather purse with one hand, a withdrawal slip for $150 in the other. It was a simple, mundane task. The ATM outside had been broken. The repairman was coming to fix my dishwasher, and I needed cash. It should have been nothing. But in Vanessa's world, nothing ever stayed small. Stella. Her voice cut through the lobby like a knife. Sweet like honey, but the kind of honey that could hide poison. Is that really you? I turned slowly. There she was. My older sister, Vanessa Solon, branch manager of this bank. She looked perfect. Her tailored black suit was flawless. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a sleek, elegant knot. Her smile was wide and bright and completely fake. Heads turned. The man in front of me glanced over his shoulder. The teller at the counter paused, her hands hovering over her keyboard. In an instant, I became the center of attention. "Hi, Vanessa," I said, keeping my voice steady. She walked toward me, her heels clicking with purpose. She didn't hug me. She never did. She stopped a few feet away and looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my simple cotton blouse and faded jeans. Her smile tightened just a fraction. "What are you doing here?" she asked, loud enough for everyone in the first 3 teller lines to hear. "I thought you did all your banking online from that little credit union or wherever." I swallowed hard. I just needed some cash. The ATM was out of order. Vanessa glanced at my withdrawal slip, then leaned in as if sharing a secret. But her voice remained theatrical and loud. $150? Her eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "Stella, that's all you're here for?" A woman behind me shifted her weight, pretending not to listen, but her eyes were fixed on us. The security guard near the door had stopped his slow pacing. The lobby went quiet. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. Then came the final twist of the knife. Vanessa let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a weapon. "Do you even have that much in your account?" she asked, the words echoing off the high ceilings. "I'd hate for you to get declined. I think I have a 20 in my purse. I could spot you if you need it." Public humiliation, wrapped in the package of fake concern. Her specialty. My palms itched. My first instinct was to run, to flee this bank and the dozens of eyes boring into me. I wanted to disappear completely. But then something inside me shifted. A tiny, quiet click, like a lock finally falling into place after years of being jammed. I was tired. I lifted my head and looked directly into her cold blue eyes. I saw the flicker of triumph in them, the satisfaction she got from making me feel small. And I gave her something she didn't expect. I smiled. It was faint, barely there, but it was real. "I have enough," I said, my voice surprisingly calm and clear. "And I'll be withdrawing more soon." The double meaning was just for me. She couldn't possibly understand it. Vanessa scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Right. Maybe enough for coffee." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking her victory march across the floor. She didn't look back. I turned back to the counter and waited for my turn. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes, avoided looking at me directly. She just processed my transaction quickly and quietly. As I walked out into the cool morning air, I made myself a silent promise. That was going to be the last time. Growing up, our family was a solar system and Vanessa was the sun. Everything orbited around her. My parents, my grandparents, our neighbors, all caught in her gravitational pull. She was bright, dazzling, always at the center. And I was Pluto, a distant, cold, forgotten rock, barely part of the system at all. While Vanessa was winning debate tournaments and getting early acceptance to prestigious business school, I was in my room with books or in the garage taking apart old radios to see how they worked. My world was internal circuits and stories. Hers was external, applause and admiration. My parents didn't mean to be cruel. They just didn't know what to do with me. I was a puzzle they couldn't solve, so they focused on the daughter they understood. I remember I was about 20. I had just launched my first tech startup from my college dorm, custom software for local businesses. A small newspaper ran a feature on me, a human interest story with a grainy photo. It was the proudest moment of my life. I bought 10 copies and drove home for the weekend, my heart thumping with excitement. I wanted them to see me. Just once, I wanted them to really see me. I found my parents in the kitchen. My mom was chopping vegetables. My dad was reading the sports section. "Mom, Dad," I said, unfolding the newspaper. "Look, they wrote about my company." My mom wiped her hands on her apron and glanced at the page. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she said, her eyes scanning the article before returning to her carrots. My dad lowered his paper and skimmed the headline. I searched his face for a flicker of pride, a hint of surprise. There was nothing. He folded the paper back up and handed it to me. "That's nice, dear," he said flatly. He then turned to my mom. "Did you hear? Vanessa just closed on her first house. Beautiful 3-bedroom in the suburbs. We should think about what to get her for her housewarming party." And just like that, my moment was over. My tiny star had been extinguished by the blinding light of the sun. That was the moment I truly understood. In their story, the story of the Solon family, I was a background character. An extra. A set piece. There to fill the frame but with no lines. The hurt was a cold, heavy stone in my chest. But it was also clarifying. Trying to win their approval was like trying to catch smoke. So I stopped trying. I stopped sharing my successes. I built a wall around my life, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I became an expert at being invisible. I built my real story in silence. On sleepless nights fueled by coffee and code. In the quiet solitude of my small apartment, far away from my family's expectations. They thought my world was small and gray. They had no idea I was building an empire in the dark. Behind my simple life, my rented apartment, my second-hand car, my modest clothes, I was hiding something vast. A secret so large it felt like another dimension entirely. It began with $8,000 and a promise. The money came from my grandmother, the only person in my family who ever truly saw me. She didn't care about Vanessa's trophies. She cared about the things that made my eyes light up. She would sit with me for hours while I explained circuits and code. She understood the passion. When she passed away, she left Vanessa her jewelry and the family china. She left me an envelope with $8,000 in cash and a handwritten note. It said, "For one of your brilliant projects. Make something wonderful. I believe in you." That money was a seed. The last gift of faith anyone had ever given me. I had been obsessed since college with the stock market, not as a gambler, but as a system of patterns. I believed human emotion, fear, greed, created predictable waves that a machine could learn to ride. So I started building. After my boring day job in IT support, I would work deep into the night. That $8,000 went into better hardware, cloud computing, endless coffee. I called my project Spectra, an artificial intelligence trading algorithm I designed from scratch. The first year was full of failures. I lost almost half the money on bad models and failed predictions. I almost gave up a dozen times. But my grandmother's note was taped to my monitor. "I believe in you." So I kept going. I refined the code. I fed Spectra more data, teaching it to recognize patterns, to learn from its mistakes, to think faster and more logically than any human trader could. The breakthrough came on a rainy Wednesday night. I had been working 36 hours straight. I ran a simulation and, with my last reserves, Let Spectra make a series of live micro trades on the foreign exchange market. I woke up the next morning to find my account balance was over $17,000. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. It wasn't a fluke. By the end of the week, I had over 50,000. By the end of the month, nearly $500,000. Spectra wasn't just working. It was a miracle. Over the next decade, that initial 8,000 grew exponentially. I incorporated quietly under an anonymous holding company. A bland, forgettable name. Orion Quantum Capital. I hired lawyers and accountants through encrypted channels, never meeting them in person. My identity was buried under layers of corporate shells and legal firewalls. By the time I turned 40, the seed had grown into a forest. A vast, sprawling empire of wealth. Real estate, tech investments, blue-chip stocks, international accounts. The total value of Orion's assets was $4.2 billion. I was, by every possible metric, a billionaire. A ghost. A whisper in the financial world. And absolutely no one knew. My parents still thought I was working a dead-end IT job. Vanessa still saw me as her broke, pathetic little sister. I never upgraded my life. I kept the same apartment, the same car. I bought my clothes from discount stores. It started as a way to maintain my anonymity, but it became something more. It was a silent rebellion. Their world revolved around the appearance of success. The big house, the fancy car, the expensive clothes. They valued the wrapper, not the gift inside. So I kept my gift hidden, knowing its true worth myself. And that's what made the bank scene sting in a new way. The irony was suffocating. My sister, the branch manager, mocking me for needing $150, had absolutely no idea that she was speaking to the person whose assets propped up the entire financial institution she worked for. I drove home from the bank in a daze. Vanessa's voice was on a loop in my head. Do you even have that much? The shame was a bitter metallic taste in my mouth. Not rage. Not a desire for revenge. It was clarity. A calm, focused energy that settled deep in my bones. For 41 years I had played their game by their rules. I had accepted my role as the lesser daughter. I had absorbed the little cuts, the dismissive comments, the casual cruelty. But sitting there in the dim light of my apartment, I finally understood. There was no game to win. Their perception of me was set in stone. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. With a deep sense of purpose, I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life, illuminating my face in its cool blue light. I connected to my secure server. My fingers flew across the keyboard, entering the complex passphrase that guarded my empire. The Orion Quantum Capital dashboard appeared, clean, minimalist, showing charts and asset allocations in real time. My real world. The one I had built. Out of curiosity, I decided to trace a thread. One of my primary holding companies had been on an acquisition spree over the past year, buying up smaller regional banks. I pulled up the list of acquisitions. My eyes scanned down the names. And then I saw it. Crescent National Bank. My sister's bank. The stage for her grand performance of my humiliation. It was a subsidiary of a company that was a subsidiary of a company that I owned entirely. Vanessa worked for me. Indirectly, through 3 corporate layers and a mountain of legal paperwork. But the fact remained. Her salary, her title, her glass-walled office, all of it was enabled by the profits generated by my creation. She was a tiny, insignificant employee in her little sister's massive, silent empire. I navigated to the accounts page, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. I located the primary liquidity reserve that Orion held within the Crescent National Banking Network. A colossal sum. I stared at the glowing number on my screen. If I pulled that balance, if I transferred that entire sum out of their network in one single transaction, the effect would be catastrophic. The bank's internal systems would register a complete capital flight. Automated safeguards would trigger. Liquidity ratios would collapse. It would create a digital earthquake and her branch would be at the epicenter. The power to shatter her world was right there under my fingertips. One click. That's all it would take. But as I looked at that number, the feeling wasn't vengeful glee. It was something much colder, much quieter, and infinitely more powerful. It was clarity. It was balance. For years, the scales of our family had been tipped so far in her favor that they had broken. She had all the power, all the worth, all the attention. I had none. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge was messy and emotional. This was about correcting a fundamental error in the system. I slept soundly that night, more deeply than I had in years. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was streaming through my window. I felt rested. I felt ready. At exactly 9 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee and my phone. I dialed a number from memory, the direct line to my lead counsel, a man I had never met in person. He answered on the first ring. "Good morning," he said, his voice crisp and professional. "Good morning, Robert," I replied, my voice even and steady. "I need you to initiate the liquidity stress test on the Crescent National Holdings. All of it. The full $4.2 billion. Effective immediately." There was a brief pause. "Understood," he said without further question. "I'll trigger the order. The system is automated from here. The initial wire instructions will hit their central processing in about 5 minutes." "Thank you, Robert," I said, and I ended the call. That was it. The first domino had been pushed. When I walked through the heavy glass doors of Crescent National Bank for the second time in 24 hours, the atmosphere was unrecognizable. The serene corporate calm from yesterday had shattered. Now it was controlled chaos. The cool, sterile air was thick with tension and frantic energy. About 30 customers clustered in the lobby, some in agitated groups, others standing alone, their faces masks of confusion and growing anger. Phones were pressed to ears. Voices were raised. "What do you mean the system is down?" A man in a construction uniform yelled at a young teller, his face red with fury. "I have a crew to pay." The teller was pale and sweating. "I'm sorry, sir. We're experiencing a network-wide issue. We can't access any account information right now." The bank staff scurried back and forth like ants in a disturbed hill. Their professional smiles had been replaced with tight, worried lines. They had no answers. I stood near the entrance, an island of stillness in the turbulent sea of panic. And then I saw her. Vanessa was standing near her glass-walled office, her back to me. Her perfect hair had loose strands framing her face, which was flushed. She was gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles were white, pacing a short, sharp path in front of her door. The facade was cracking. I began to walk toward her. My steps were slow, deliberate, silent on the marble floor. The chaos seemed to part for me. She turned, ready to resume her pacing, and that's when she saw me. She froze mid-step. Her phone was still pressed to her ear. Her eyes widened first in confusion, then in pure unadulterated rage. She ended her call abruptly and stormed toward me, her heels clicking like gunshots in the tense lobby. "You," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "What are you doing here again? Are you here to gloat? Did your pathetic little account overdraw and break the entire system?" Her voice was loud, drawing the attention of people closest to us. They looked from her furious face to my calm one, their own problems momentarily forgotten. I didn't answer her immediately. I just looked at her, letting her anger wash over me. It was so predictable. If something went wrong, someone had to be blamed. And for her entire life, I had been her favorite person to blame. "I just came to check on my accounts, Vanessa," I said softly. "Your accounts?" She laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. "No one can check on their accounts. The entire network is frozen. This is a major crisis and you're wandering in here like you're lost. Go home, Stella. The adults are busy." She turned her back on me, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. But before she could take a step, new commotion started at the entrance. Two men in expensive charcoal suits hurried through the doors, followed by two more people in similar corporate attire, all clutching tablets. The man in the lead was older, with graying hair and a deeply worried expression. His eyes scanned the lobby frantically, like a general searching for the source of an attack. He swept past the angry customers, his gaze landing on Vanessa, then moving past her to fixate on me. He rushed forward, his entourage struggling to keep up. He stopped directly in front of me, breathing heavily. "Miss Stella Solon?" he asked, his voice breathless and strained. Vanessa, who had been watching this with a baffled expression, stepped forward possessively. "Excuse me, Mr. Hahn. I'm handling things here. This is my sister. She was just leaving." Mr. Hahn, the regional director, looked at Vanessa as if she had just grown a second head. His expression was a mixture of terror and utter disbelief. He ignored her completely, his full attention locked on me. "Miss Solon," he repeated, his voice dropping to a tone of profound, almost fearful respect. "I'm David Hahn, the regional director. We need to speak privately right now." The lobby was now almost completely silent. Everyone was watching. Vanessa's frown deepened. "Why are you talking to her? She has nothing to do with this. I'm the manager of this branch." Mr. Hahn finally turned to look at Vanessa, and his expression was cold as ice. "You aren't understanding," he said, his words slow and deliberate. "The network freeze, the transaction halt. It originated as a response to a single massive liquidity transfer request." He paused, then turned back to me, his gaze unwavering. "The request came from Orion Quantum Capital." Vanessa's face remained blank. The name clearly meant nothing to her. "So what does that have to do with my sister?" she asked. Mr. Hahn took a deep breath like a man about to defuse a bomb. "Because your sister, Miss Stella Solon," he said, his voice clear and ringing in the silent lobby, "is Orion Quantum Capital's principal owner. According to the documents I was just sent from our parent firm, she owns 87% of their total asset holdings. She, for all intents and purposes, owns this bank." The world stopped. Vanessa's mouth dropped open. The color drained from her face, not in a sudden rush, but in a slow, sickening wave, leaving her skin a pasty grayish white. Her eyes, wide with horror, darted from Mr. Hahn's grim face to mine. She shook her head in a tiny jerky motion, as if trying to dislodge a thought that was too impossible to hold. "She what?" The words came out as a strangled whisper. The tellers behind the counter were staring, their mouths agape. The customers were frozen, listening intently. They had come in with their own small financial dramas only to stumble into a corporate tragedy. Mr. Hahn had turned his full attention back to me, his tone pleading. "We've halted the transaction temporarily to prevent a total system collapse, Miss Solon, but your final authorization is needed. Please tell us what we need to do." I held his gaze. I felt the weight of every eye in the room on me. This was the moment, the culmination of a lifetime of silence. "Understood," I said calmly, my voice steady. "First, the manager responsible for the professional misconduct that occurred at this branch yesterday afternoon. She's relieved of her duties, effective immediately." A collective gasp went through the staff. Vanessa stumbled back a step, her hand flying to her chest as if she'd been physically struck. Her face crumpled, the disbelief finally giving way to sheer, uncomprehending panic. "No," she stammered, shaking her head more forcefully now. "No, you can't. Stella, you wouldn't. It was a joke. I was just teasing you." I finally looked at her. I really looked at her. And for the first time in our lives she truly saw me. Not the sister she mocked. Not the invisible one who fixed her computer and faded into the background at parties. She saw the woman who held her entire world in the palm of her hand. "You were right, Vanessa," I said softly, my voice carrying in the dead silence. 150 wasn't much. But respect? That's priceless. There was no shouting, no dramatic, tearful scene. Vanessa's collapse was as quiet and complete as a building imploding in on itself. The fight drained out of her, replaced by the entire foundation of her life, her career, her superiority, her understanding of her place in the world, and most importantly, her understanding of mine, had been pulverized in less than 2 minutes.